this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
Welcome to Flyover Takes. I'm Chris Wanless from Is This Heaven, and today we are recapping a 27-16 Packers victory over the Denver Broncos that kept the Packers undefeated at 3-0. It wasn't always pretty, especially offensively, as we've kind of become accustomed to in the early stages of the Matt LaFleur era. But they took advantage of the breaks they got, and honestly, there was never a point in this game where it really felt in doubt. So let's get things started by taking a look over the stat sheet. Offensively for the Packers, 312 total yards, 235 of those to the air, 77 rushing. 2 of 9 on third down, which we'll get to a little bit later. Tad concerning, it's becoming a bit of a trend. Time of possession, 24-26, so outpossessed for a lot of the game there. Aaron Rodgers, 17 out of 29 for 235 yards and a touchdown, 96.2 rating by his standards. Kind of a pedestrian performance, he said afterwards. He definitely wants to play better. He wants to see, quote, greatness out there is what he said. So we'll see. Not a bad stat line by any means, but again, by his standards, pretty right down the middle. Jamal Williams, 12 carries, 59 yards. Also added a couple catches for 27. Did not find the end zone. Those touches went to Aaron Jones, who actually only carried 10 times for 19 yards, 1.9 average. But he did sneak in with a couple short touchdown runs. So good to see that. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, top receiver for the Packers yesterday. 6 catches on 10 targets for 99 and a touchdown on that first drive. 40-yarder on a free play from Aaron Rodgers. And then Devontae Adams, 4 catches on 4 targets, 56 yards. Defensively for the Packers, 310 yards given up, pretty solid day there. 149 on the ground, 161 passing for Joe Flacco. 2 fumble recoveries for the Packers defense and interception, but they actually allowed 8 of 15 third down conversions, so the Broncos over 50%. Pretty solid, but again, only gave up 16 points, and that's really all that matters. Preston Smith, 3 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. His buddy Zadarius Smith, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs, 3 quarterback hits. Jair Alexander continuing to take the step in his second year, 7 tackles, 2 pass defenses, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery, all in one motion, basically, just ripping the ball away from Noah Fant. Blake Martinez getting in on the action with another double-digit tackle game, 12 tackles for him, and Darnell Savage, the rookie safety, with his first career interception. Moving on to this week's 3 observations. Number 1, although it felt like the offense really kind of stagnated again after the fast start, the point production I thought was actually fairly spread out. The Packers scored on 5 of 11 possessions, one of which they basically conceded at the end of the first half, so maybe you count that as 10 true possessions. They had just 2 3-and-outs, punted only 4 times on those, again, 10 legit possessions. I think what probably made things feel a little more stagnant was the fact that the Broncos just possessed the ball for so much longer. That gave the Packers less possessions, obviously, which in turn kind of amplified sequences like, for example, the one we saw in the third quarter where they had back-to-back possessions of like 3 and 5 plays, both of which ended in punts. When you have fewer possessions, production obviously is a little more at a premium. So when you have back-to-back quick possessions, things start to seem a little bit broken, especially when you're going so long in between those possessions. Having said that, the offense definitely benefited from a couple short fields after the defense forced turnovers, with 2 possessions starting at the Denver 5 and then the Denver 37, respectively. if you remove those 2 possessions from the equation, then sure, things were a little murkier than when they had longer fields to navigate. But that's the beauty of having a great defense. They give you opportunities that are much easier to maximize. So while the middle portion of that game might have felt like kind of a slog, I don't think it was quite as bad as some have pointed out. Next observation. This is the first time since weeks 12 to 14 of the 2016 season, the beginning of the infamous run-the-table winning streak, that the Packers have held opponents to less than 20 points in 3 straight games. That might be tested a little more stiffly against, a solid Philadelphia offense, depending on where Philly's sitting injury-wise and everything like that in Week 4, Thursday night here. But there's no denying that the defense's impact on this season so far has been huge. It's not so much that they've been ultra-dominant necessarily, but that they've just made the big plays when they're there to be made. 3 more turnovers forced against the Broncos now puts them at the top of the league with a +6 turnover ratio. And they forced 8 turnovers in 3 games. Last season, they forced 15 turnovers all season long. You heard that correctly. They're already over halfway to their total for all of last season. The combination of confidence and skill that we're seeing from this unit is turning them into something we've not seen in Green Bay for quite some time, and that is a defense that not only contributes, but that can actually win games for this team. Final observation, looking at the snap counts from this game. It's interesting to see the Packers' willingness to lean towards productivity at running back in particular, just given the previous regime's apparent strategy of giving Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams equal snaps no matter what. Williams played 35 snaps against Denver, 61%, while Jones only played 22, 39%. Part of that could have been with the short turnaround in mind, trying to take some reps off of Jones's body, but Matt LaFleur said after this game it had more to do with just how the flow of the game went, and Jamal Williams was being a little more productive. Other snap counts that stood out. Mercedes Lewis led tight ends with 31 snaps. That's 54% of the offensive snaps. Jimmy Graham saw 24, and Robert Tonyan got 17. Graham did pop up on the injury report last week, I believe with a groin, but this could be something to monitor as the season goes on, with Graham not really featuring in the passing game outside of that Week 1 touchdown against Chicago. And as we've seen through all 3 weeks, you're just not going to get far with Jimmy Graham being a lead blocker in the running game. So as his snaps start to dwindle, just something maybe to keep an eye on. No big surprises on defense, snap count-wise, with Adrian Amos, Blake Martinez, Jair Alexander, and Darnell Savage playing every snap for the 3rd straight week. Kevin King played 93% of snaps. I believe that's right in line with where he was last week as well. Despite having a bit of a rough go in this game, did not look great, but it's clear they're counting on him and Alexander to be the primary corners now, with Tremont Williams' snap counts yesterday dropping down to only 62%. So King and Alexander seem to be where the Packers want to go, but certainly Kevin King's going to have to improve upon what he showed against Denver. And now for what I liked and what I didn't from the Week 3 win over Denver. Let's start with what I liked. The sequence near the end of the first half that led to the touchdown that put the Packers up 17-10. Denver had just tied the game at 10. Green Bay got the ball back with a little under 4 minutes left in the half. They go 3 and out in all of 1 minute and 15 seconds, and that's where the beauty of this sequence starts. First, J.K. Scott, who had another monster game and might get another mention on this list, lifts a 50-yard punt that's fair caught at the 18, and on the ensuing play, Preston Smith strip sacks Joe Flacco. Rashawn Gary recovers at the 5. and 2 plays later, Aaron Jones is in the end zone, and the Packers are back on top. The intertwining of all 3 phases in a matter of basically 90 seconds of game time is just a beautiful example of team football. The offense is getting a little bogged down. Denver's gaining some momentum, but the punter comes on the field, does his job, uncorks one. The defense snatches the ball right back, and then the offense takes advantage and finishes the job. It just seems like the type of thing, again, that we have not seen in recent years with this team. While I'm on it, got to give a shout-out to J.K. Scott, the baby-faced assassin. The aforementioned 50-yarder was great, but how about an average of 53 yards on 4 punts, including a monster 66-yarder that ended up putting Denver on their own 2-yard line. He's averaging 48.6 yards per kick on the season, and it seems like every time he needs to hit a boomer, he's doing it. So big ups to J.K. Scott. Next, what I liked. I liked that for the second straight week, Matt LaFleur's script seemed to press all the right buttons. Obviously, the book on LaFleur as a head coach and even as a play caller is still slim, and we've seen all 3 defenses the Packers have faced this year make effective adjustments as games have gone on. But last week against the Vikings and in this one against the Broncos, the opening drives were both efficient and successful, which is exactly what you're looking for when you're putting together, the scripted portion of your game plan. I'll be extremely interested to see, whether that trend can continue with, opposing coaches getting more and more information on how LaFleur likes to operate, and especially on a short week now against Philadelphia. But for now, it looks like LaFleur is stressing defenses where he knows he can get them early on in games, and that's something that you just love to see. And lastly, what I liked, short and sweet here, but the defensive camaraderie. Not much else to say, but it's just awesome to see those guys having fun, making big plays, and then celebrating with each other. I hope those defensive end zone pictures continue every single week. Now, for what I did not like, and, there's really not a whole lot not to like after a win that puts you at 3-0, honestly. But there's a couple things. First, the third downs, man. 2 for 9 is just not going to win you a ton of ball games in the long run. And quite frankly, it's a little shocking that the Packers have been able to start 3-0 going 9 of 36 on third downs. They're 25% on third down conversions through 3 games. We've talked about it before, but it's still coming down to getting into manageable third down situations. The average yards to go for Green Bay on third down against Denver was a shade under 10.5. I mean, you're getting to a point where on third downs, by the time you get to a third down, you've lost half a yard on the first 2 plays. I mean, seriously, you can't expect to survive when you're playing from behind the chains so often. And that's something LaFleur has talked about seemingly endlessly through the first 3 weeks. But like I said before, luckily the defense has been there with takeaways and putting the offense back in great field position. But at some point, avoiding third and long has to become a major focus, or things are going to go south in a hurry. Next, this is getting a little nitpicky because it's something they cleaned up as the game went on, but the tackling through about the first 2.5 quarters was not good. One play near the goal line comes to mind. It was a Phillip Lindsay touchdown. He was pretty much stacked up, but slipped away for the score. And you can certainly look at it as a phenomenal effort by Phillip Lindsay, which it was, but that's kind of besides the point because he was wrapped up and they couldn't finish the job. And that's just the most obvious example that comes to mind, but there were others. Like I said, it seemed like by the fourth quarter, things had picked up significantly, so hopefully that's something they can build on as they go forward. Again, not really a whole not to like after going 3-0. Now it's about getting focused on a quick turnaround and another home game Thursday night against Philadelphia. And speaking of that, make sure to keep it tuned to Is This Heaven as we try to get you set for the Thursday night game against the Eagles as the Packers try to keep the train rolling to 4-0. If you like what we do here, either on the podcast or over on the website, make sure to subscribe or give us a follow so you're not missing a beat. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.